So, welcome everybody back to the Fire Marshal Files. I'm your host, Josh Owens, Deputy Fire Marshal with the City of Lexington. And today we have a very special guest with us, Kelly Ransdell from the National Fire Protection Association. And Kelly, you are the Director of Public Education for our area, correct?
That's right. Actually, I am a homegrown North Carolinian out of Fuquay, North Carolina. And if you would have told me that a tobacco farmer's daughter could go on to direct this internationally for the National Fire Protection Association, I would say, no way. And so I always am very honored that I get to lead this work. A good old North Carolinian gal being able to kind of drive the direction that we take as an organization to kind of make people live safely in our world.
Awesome. Yep. And I know we've been through a lot of classes with you, learned a lot from you. So kind of give us a little bit of background. I know you said you're from North Carolina. What led you into this, and kind of what was your path to get to the Director of Public Education for NFPA?
So I actually started in emergency services in 94. So I feel like I was 18 years old, started running EMS, and
Wow.
then I had the opportunity. I was working on my undergrad and going to graduate school, and I was a volunteer for fire and EMS, and I got to see a different side of the world. And that kind of started my journey in injury prevention. And I had the opportunity to join the state fire marshal's office in June of 2000.
Okay.
And I went to the state fire marshal's office and I worked in the East, and then I became a supervisor and I did car seat stuff, and I loved it. And I started seeing that we could really make a difference. And so when I had the opportunity to leave that office, I became the deputy director of the state fire marshal's office in the prevention programs and grants. And so we were able to do lots of cool things. And while I was there, I was the state director of Safe Kids. And so we did all injury prevention, pretty much, we said from little tiny infants all the way to older adults. And one of the first programs I ever did for older adults was a program called Remembering When, which
I
was
remember
from
that
this group
program.
called NFPA. And I was like, NFPA, that's a big group out of Boston. Wow. And I went to a training, and then I got on the road and we started working with older adults. And I was fortunate enough to have my grandparents until my grandmother died 3 years ago. And so I watched her go from perfectly fine living at home independently to I saw her be experience falls. And so I would say that my life always mimics my work. And then in 2015, I was not expecting it, but I had the opportunity and they recruited me to come to work for NFPA full time. But we decided we weren't going to move for a job. So I said, well, I'd love to work for you, but I'm not leaving North Carolina. And they said, well, that's great because it's a remote position. So I started working in the 17 states in the South and New England. And when they told me I was going to work in New England, I said, okay, did y'all really think about this? Because as soon as I open my mouth, they're going to be like, what in the world? And they told me, they said, here's what we'll tell you about New England. Yes, we thought about putting you up there. And we decided that they might be initially shocked when you open your mouth, but as soon as they know that you're knowledgeable and that you know what you're talking about, you're going to be fine. And so I spent the next 5 years working in New England, those states, and I got to see some really cool things, and then working in the 10 states of the South. And then during COVID, during 2020, I was actually reorged over to regional ops. And so I went back to kind of the roots. I had done my fire inspector one, two, and three back before I even joined the state fire marshal's office. And so I know that code side. I love the pub ed side. And so I started working in the 8 states from North Carolina to Texas. And so I was doing all types of trainings for NFPA. And I actually developed a love for that because I found out that you can teach stuff and you don't have to be boring. You can actually give
Absolutely.
people lots of good information. And I met so many cool people in the fire service, fire marshals, firefighters, fire chiefs, worked in that community risk reduction space with educators. And then last year I had the opportunity to kind of throw my hat in the ring, and it was not a shoe-in type thing. I'll tell you, it was a really long process. 5 interviews, 100 people.
Oh, wow.
I was like, okay, Lord, if this is where you want me, that's where you'll put me. And so we got down to it, and I won it hands down, and they offered me the job. And I was like, now look, I have a very specific plan on where I'd like to see us in 1, 3, and 5 years. And they said, oh, we don't know if the team can handle that. And I said, well, then I'm not the right person, like,
Right.
because I'm old enough and I have a passion for this work that I knew where I wanted to see us go. So I've just celebrated a little over a year as being the national director. And with that, we launched a brand new theme for Fire Prevention Week this year. And so it's been super exciting kind of see that come to fruition. But that's my journey on how I got here.
Awesome, awesome. So you mentioned the brand new theme, and like you said, it's not something we've ever seen before. So this year's theme is Charge into Fire Safety, Lithium Ion Batteries in Your Home. So tell us a little bit about that. How did that come up? I know we've seen a lot with lithium batteries, but what drove us to that for this year's theme?
So I'll tell you, I mentioned to you that I've been working all over the country in regional ops. And as part of that, I have spent a lot of time analyzing what we're seeing in the field. And we have been educating the fire service on rechargeable or lithium ion batteries. And the
Right.
reason for that is we were seeing some common things happening across this new technology. And to give you a little background, of course, it started with our cell phones got smaller and smaller and thinner
Mhm.
and thinner. And somebody said, hey, what if we took that battery and put it in some other stuff? And that's kind of the origin in a not very sciencey way of how we saw these batteries introduced into other products. And what happened was sometimes technology happens ahead of the science that's needed to support it. And that's what happened in this case. The fire service was not at the table. And we found that these new batteries, which are called lithium ion batteries, or anything that's rechargeable, pretty much has lithium ion. There is a dark side to it. One, it's
Mhm.
very compact, it has great power. They are very compact. But there is a dark side to them, and that is that they have to be handled very specifically. They aren't great with temperature extremes. They also have an innate fire risk because of the lithium salts that are in it. And they have a little piece in the middle of it. And what happens is it has molecules in it that kind of like move from side to side. And they have this really, really thin thing in the middle called a separator. It's actually 1/24th of a hair.
Oh
So
wow.
I love that analogy because I'm like, oh my gracious, like if you
Puts
were
it
to
in
look at how
perspective.
thin a hair is, it's
Yes.
a little tiny separator. And so if that ever gets damaged, what happens is it short circuits the battery and
Right.
it starts generating heat. And so the problem with them is when they go into what we call thermal runaway, they actually will perforate and get so hot that they'll break the outside barrier and they explode. They'll have gas, and then that gas has heat from inside and explodes. And that's why they're so dangerous, is because depending on it, they're little tiny batteries that create big fire.
Hmm.
And so, as we talked to the fire service about the chemistry of it and also what was going on and how things are damaged by heat and cold, I mean, in North Carolina, it's beautiful now this fall. We've had a pretty day, but we've had some really hot days.
Yep.
Imagine how many of these electronics are left in cars. They're not designed to be super hot. If you're from
Absolutely.
another part of the country, they're not designed to be super cold. And then there's always the joke of how many times can you drop it before it gets damaged? Because
Yep.
there is some science to that, but it's kind of like how many licks to the inside of a Tootsie Roll. Like, I don't know what the magic formula is. And it's the same with them. And so we decided that, okay, if we need to educate the fire service on this because you're seeing it, and we were talking to firefighters, and since you're a firefighter podcast, we want people to know that any firefighter that goes to a lithium ion fire, you need to be wearing your SCBA because the
Hmm.
carcinogens that are in it, we don't know the exact chemistry of everything. And
Right.
so to protect you, we want to make sure that you're always wearing your SCBA. So we decided, okay, you cannot message this to the public in a very sciencey or a really complicated way. But there were three things that kind of rose to the top of what were causing problems with these batteries. And so as a result of that, we decided within lithium ion batteries in the home, we wanted to talk about three things that you could do to keep you safe if you have them. And we also wanted people to assess the risk. And that is just between you and I right here on this podcast. I mean, look around you. How many rechargeable things do you have right there in your office? Like, give me a ballpark because I'm sitting here with five of them just surrounding me on
I
my
think
person.
just in this podcast room, I've got two on my side right now, plus the computer we're on, plus some other stuff. So there's probably four or five just in this little room that we're in. So,
Absolutely. And so when people start thinking about their homes, you have rechargeable toothbrush, You have a rechargeable razor. If you have power tools, chances are you have a battery
Hmm.
pack that works for all of them. And in many cases, people will put these things on the charger and leave them. And so, as a result of this, we said, hey, what three things, because that's about as much as people can absorb, could we talk about? And it came down to three main things, and hopefully, we'll have time to talk about them. But the first one was buying safely for listed and certified products. The next one was how you charge safely and what you do to do that. And then the third one is how do I get rid of these in the right way? And the right way to do that was to recycle them responsibly. And so we have messaging around each one of these topics.
Right. And so you mentioned buying them safely because, like you said, they're in everything. We're seeing them everywhere now. Phones, laptops, scooters, even.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to turn on the news anymore without seeing a local fire department responding to an e-battery fire somewhere. And of course, they're in vehicles now. But you talked about buying them safely. So, what exactly does that mean? Can I just go on Amazon and just get a battery for my phone? Can I just
Well,
go
and,
get
and
a
that's the
replacement for
issue.
my drill?
That's exactly right. And this is what it comes down to is that in the United States, we need to make sure that we're buying listed or certified products. Now, you may say, well, why are you saying listed or certified? Well, certified is the term that UL uses. So,
Okay.
UL is one of the places that is a safety standard. They create safety standards. So, you may see a U and a L on the packaging or on an item, and that means it's been certified. That's the language used by UL. But there's also over 100 nationally recognized testing labs. And they are places in the United States that can list products. And that
Okay.
means if a product is listed or certified, it means it meets minimum safety standards. And that means that they have been tested to make sure they're going to perform the way they should. Now, you brought up Amazon, and it would be any online buying. One of the challenges is that we have become a society that you may not actually physically put your hands on something until you
Right.
receive it.
Yep.
But this is one of those things where be chargeable. And I'm one of those nerds that now when I go to a big box store, if I'm getting ready to buy something, I actually pick up the box and I flip it over because on the box and also on the item, it will show you whether it's listed or certified. And that is a really important step to take because products that have been listed perform to the minimum standards. So that means that even things like a candle warmer. So my kids, I drive them crazy because they wanted to buy a candle warmer, which is a great alternative to using candles the normal way,
Right.
but it's an
Absolutely.
electronic. And any kind of electronic or anything that you buy, if it's been listed, then we know how it performs. So we
Mhm.
even look for things like that because it's super important that it performs. So if you're buying online, you really have to do your homework to make sure that you look at the product details because it will say on there the listing. Unfortunately, there are many products that are sold online that do not meet US standards. And that is a very scary thing. And why we're seeing this, the other thing is that some retailers that may offer things at a very cheap price, we'll just say it like that,
Right.
they may actually have counterfeit products that have
Ah,
not been listed. And you as a fire marshal know that means the wiring could be faulty. It doesn't meet the standards we have. And so this is a very serious thing. And that means that sometimes you may have to make a decision to choose safety over cheap. And that
exactly.
is, in many cases, they are comparable, but you may need to spend a few more dollars to buy something that meets the safety standards. But the return of the peace of mind of that is so much more. So that's the first thing is if we could all make sure that we're buying things that meet the minimum standards. Cell phones have been around a long time, so they are much more adapt and have been tested. But it is these auxiliary products that may not have that listing, and so that's the first thing is buying things that are listed and certified.
And even with the cell phones, you mentioned that it's easy to go to a gas station now and just pick up a charger. That may not always be the best thing. Yeah, like you said, it's cheaper, but if we're using that wrong battery, that wrong charger, and we end up with a fire, and the end result is it's going to cost us a whole lot more than the few extra dollars it would have if we would have went and bought the, say, the Apple certified charger or the
That's
Android
right.
certified charger versus the gas station charger because we needed one.
Well, and you mentioned replacing a battery and things, and that is where that is also a key component in that buying space. And that is if you have to replace a battery for something, you need to buy a battery that has been approved for that device. We had a computer that my daughter had that it was a laptop and the battery quit working. And so
Right.
we had to go to the manufacturer of the computer and find out what battery was allowed to be used because it will, since it's a laptop, it's
Mhm.
rechargeable. So it did matter what battery we bought. And so you're going to have to do some homework and you may not be able to buy the cheapest thing out there as a replacement because if it's not listed for that device or hasn't met it, then it's not safe to use it.
And then you're going to end up with a fire, like you said. And one thing I think a lot of people don't realize with these rechargeable devices is they actually never fully lose a charge. So
That's
you think, all right, well, my cell phone battery's dead, it's at zero, but is it really? There's still a charge in there. You can still have a fire from that. And actually, we had one here in the city, a laptop that hadn't been used for over a year. We had a fire because that battery actually overheated in that device and it caused a fire. And so that's something that a lot of people don't realize, especially with this charging, like you were talking about. They don't fully decharge, but then there's other risks with the charging. We can overcharge them or not buy the correct chargers. Is that right?
Yeah. And so we talked about buying. So the next part of it that we found is charging. And that is there's several different things around charging that matter. And you kind of touched on the first one. That is if you have a charging cable that is damaged, you shouldn't use it.
Hmm.
If you lose yours or you forget it, you really need to go the extra mile and buy one that is designed for that piece of equipment. Instead of, like you said, instead of going to the closest convenience store and buying one, they are readily available. But the problem is, as soon as you put that phone on one of those chargers, you'll notice a couple of things. One is the phone or the cable are going to get hot.
Yep.
That should be a red flag, and you should automatically say, oh, something is wrong. Always buy the cables that are designed for your device, and they'll say certified for the device. That means that that is the proper one made by the manufacturer or approved by them. The second thing is when an item is fully charged. So when you charge it to maximum and it's at 100%, you're supposed to take it off the charger. That's another thing. People just assume you should leave it charging all the time. And there are some safeguards in place, but the best way to handle a rechargeable battery is charge it fully and take it off the charger. And that way it doesn't get an overcharge or an undercharge, which is something that you mentioned. And then also where you charge is very important. That is always charge on a hard surface. Teenagers unfortunately fall asleep while they're charging their phone.
Hmm.
They have them in their bed. They drop them on carpet. They have them on couches. All those can be a recipe for danger because phones are designed to be charged on a hard surface. And so charging is a very important thing. We always pick on people that have battery packs because, especially in garages,
Yep.
we say, we know you just leave them in the charger. And we're always like, okay, at the break, go home and call your significant other and ask them to take your batteries off the charger. And I do that in my own house. My husband will put it on the charger. I'll set a timer for,
Yeah.
I have an electric blower, and I literally will put that charging pack on it. I'll set a timer, and when it is over, I will take it off because you are inviting danger by leaving it in that charging state because the batteries aren't designed to be left in that environment infinitely. So that charging message is very important and something that we know how to tell people to do it safely.
Right. And even with where you charge it, a lot of people they'll charge it in their garages or maybe in an outbuilding that might have power, but it may not be heated or cooled. So you mentioned the extreme temperatures earlier. Like you said, here in North Carolina, it may be 60 degrees one day and 100 degrees the next day, or even within the same day. But when we get to those 100-degree temperatures, you've got that battery pack charging out in your garage. Now it's even hotter out there. So it's something else we need to keep an eye on. And like you said, make sure we're taking it off. What about ventilating? Do we need those well ventilated areas with these batteries?
Yeah, so one of the things we would tell you is I love that you bring up about the heat and the cold because most people put these things that have these rechargeable batteries in spaces that aren't heated and cooled. And that's part of the issue is monitoring them. And that is, making sure they aren't staying on a charger, making sure they aren't exposed to heat and cold. And so when you're deciding to buy a product, if it's a product that has to stay out in your shop all the time, it might not be the best choice to buy a
Right.
rechargeable one because you're not able to review it. I have a friend that lives in North Dakota and they were going to buy a golf cart and her husband wanted to buy a lithium ion one. And she called me and said, Kelly, tell us the benefits, the pros and cons of this lithium ion thing. And I said, well, one is your shop temperature controlled. And she's like, no. And I was like, well, how cold does it get? She said, like -30. I
Whew.
said, well, you realize that these batteries aren't designed and can actually, even if you're out by a pool, like, and sit your phone in the sun, it'll give you a warning.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, we're going to shut down because I'm at an unsafe temperature. Well, they don't have those same warnings on batteries. And so she said, oh my goodness, we could set a fire at our lake and it's 35 minutes till the local fire department even gets there. We could have a full complication of the whole lake
Yeah,
but from a lithium ion battery. And so they made the decision that because they had such temperature extremes, that they should go with a different type of battery. And those are the conversations we need to have. And that is, ventilation is not going to help it so much because of the temperature extremes. So
right.
we don't see as much of that. It's more supervision and how can you make sure that you put them in a place that they can safely exist. The other thing is people take for granted and they say, well, my battery has a charging thing that'll turn on and off. Well, those are designed for the perfect battery that's never been dropped, never been exposed to anything. But over time, you may have held one of your electronics and it may have fallen. I mean, the
Hmm.
reality is when you're using power tools, that happens. And
Absolutely.
so you're taking into account that in a perfect scenario, it would work. So we're just trying to put practices in place that reduce the possibility of something happening. And I'll tell you, right when we launched the campaign, I went to a local fire department and they said, why didn't you name the campaign, Don't Use Lithium Ion Batteries? I said, because that's not what this is about. We
Right.
all have them.
Oh yeah.
But we want you to use them safely. And here we can tell you how to. We just have to give you the right steps. So this is not about don't use them. This is about knowing the risk and then putting things in place to protect you.
Absolutely. And that's true with anything. We don't want to, anything can be a risk. We don't want to say
Right.
don't use it. We want to make sure we're doing it safely.
That's
And
right.
so, you mentioned the three pieces, and the final piece to that is the recycle piece of it. So once the batteries reach that end of life, what do we do? I don't want to just go throw this battery in the trash can. It's not a regular Duracell or Energizer double A. If I throw this battery in the trash can, there's significant risks that come behind that.
Yeah, and it's actually risk on both sides. So we say to recycle responsibly, and then we say you don't throw these in regular trash, but you also don't put them in recycling bins, your regular recycling. And so, especially in towns and counties, we have to help people find a place that they can take them and turn them in safely. And they recycle them because with these batteries, if you recycle them, then they take the inert minerals in it and they make it into something else. And it prevents you as a fire service from having to go out and have a trash truck on fire or a landfill,
Mhm.
but also a recycling facility. It is $1 million losses when people put it in their regular recycling and it goes in and is damaged and hurts people and the places that are helping us to have a better world. So we want to equip people with how's the easiest way for me to get rid of them. And I'm a cup half full person. And so I live in Fuquay, which is just south of Raleigh. And so we found that to message this campaign, I can tell you what to do in Fuquay and you can tell me what to do in Lexington, but anybody could come across your podcast. So what can we tell
Right.
them about what to do? Well, you can go to this. It's a not-for-profit called Call to Recycle. Call
Call
to
to recycle.
recycle.org. And when you go there, you put in your zip code and it will tell you where you can get rid of your lithium ion batteries safely. And so when you go on there, like you and I were talking about, you found out that there in Lexington, the best place to go is the
Lowe's
Lowe's.
Hardware.
And you'll find they have the containers right outside their
Mhm.
main door. And you can get rid of your CFL light bulbs, you can rid of your lithium ion batteries, and you can get rid of your plastic bags all in one spot.
All at one spot.
And I find that people will do the right thing if you give them good information. But if somebody came across your podcast and they weren't from Lexington, they can go online to that call to recycle, put their zip code in, and it's going to tell them. And I'll tell you, in most places, big box stores that sell items with rechargeable batteries will have a way to get rid of them. So, like Home Depot, Lowe's, Staples, some hazardous waste facilities have special handling. And so there's another website called Earth 911 that you can also go to. It doesn't have as many listings, but what we're finding is they're building more and more of this information every day to help people know how to get rid of them. Because the majority of people, when it quits working, we want them recycling it to protect it from the household trash and also from regular recycling. So that's why this podcast will be so great because you'll help people know how to do the right thing because they're in our homes every day.
Absolutely. And like we mentioned earlier, they never fully lose a charge. So you think, all right, well, it's dead. I can throw it in the trash. But the reality is that's not true. So like you said, we want to make sure we're recycling in the right manner.
That's right.
And so now what should our viewers do? One final thing before we close here. What if that battery starts to go into thermal runaway? Maybe it smells funny. We start seeing a gas or it looks like it's smoking, something to that effect. We don't want them to pick it up because you run the risk it could catch on fire in your hands. So, what's some things that our viewers can do aside from calling 911 and us showing up? What else can we do?
Yeah, so we are really specific about this messaging to the public, and I know you and the fire service would agree to this. If it starts acting funny, if it swells, if it has a weird smell, a weird look, and it changes shape or color, if it's safe, we want them to take it outside away from anything that can burn. And the reason is, it can be so unpredictable. So if it just has a preliminary change, we want you to take it away from anything that can burn if you can safely do that. If you were to have a situation where a battery is starting to smoke, we want you to get away from it, get your pets and your family away from it because it's the explosion that is the danger. And we want you to get out of the house, go to your meeting place and call 911. And the reason is they are so unpredictable and they have so much smoke and fire that there's no way I can safely tell you to do much with it.
Right.
And so that is what we want people to know is that this is a big hazard. And if it starts doing that, there's special handling that you have to do if it's damaged. And we at NFPA are getting ready to do a whole campaign with the fire service on, because we get a lot of questions like people have damaged batteries and you can't recycle them normally through the special recycling if they're damaged, but there's special care you take with those. And so we're doing some education around that as well with the fire service to help people be able to do this. We're talking to the recycling and the household waste folks in communities to help people know how to handle this. But there isn't a great thing that you can do. The other thing that you could do if you're not having any visible signs of smoke or fire is you could always, you could submerge it in some water until you can call the fire department to come. But really, the best practice is always to move it away from anything that can burn, to get away from it, and then to call for help.
Awesome. Awesome. And so I think we've covered the key takeaways here. If there was one final message you could give our viewers, what would it be?
It would be that we want you to be aware that your house is full of rechargeable items. It is just part of our modern world. We know how to help you use them safely. And so NFPA, Sparky the Fire Dog, and Lexington Fire Department are partnering together to get this message out to the public. And that is, we want you to buy things that have been listed and certified. We want you to know how to charge them safely. And then we want you to be able to recycle them by going to Call to Recycle and finding a place that can safely take them. And at the end of the day, there's tons of materials online if you go to fpw.org. fpw.org is the landing page where you'll find coloring sheets and you'll see a little video that tells about this topic. And so it's a great place to go to be able to find more resources if you're interested in it. But it's going to take everybody doing their part to make a difference and keep our world safer. And that's why this campaign is out there.
Awesome. Awesome. And so Fire Prevention Month, once again, is in October, just like it always is. And this year's Fire Prevention Week is October 5th through the 11th. And so, of course, we're going to be out in the community just like you guys are, pushing this message out, making sure everybody's safe. And so, Kelly, we appreciate you coming on today, talking with us, giving this great information for our viewers. And as always, if anybody has any questions within the city of Lexington, give us a call. Or outside of Lexington, call your local fire department if you have those questions. And again, make sure we're following these safety tips that Kelly has given us because, again, these batteries are everywhere. We want to make sure we're using them safely, we're buying them safely, we're charging them safely, we're disposing of them safely. So we want to make sure we're following that. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.